So we'll start with some audience participation. Do the names Daniel and Henrik mean anything to anyone here? How about if I told you their last name was Sedin? So they're identical twins who grew up in a small town in Sweden, and they played hockey together on the same teams from when they were kids until recently when they retired. And I don't know if it was like some twin magic or something, but like they were amazing hockey players. Like they would just do amazing things. And I suggest Googling for them and watching them on YouTube because just the plays and stuff they made. And like during their career in the NHL, they won multiple trophies, like the Art Ross Trophy for the high score, most valuable player. And fun fact, when they were in Sweden, Sweden gives out the Golden Puck Award to the most valuable player. And the year they were in the league, they gave it out to two people, both of them, because they couldn't pick just one. And that's the only time before or since that's happened. And this is Daniel and Henry. And so, but while you may not be familiar with them, there's another hockey player who made it all the way from, played hockey all his life, made it to the NHL, which is the most elite top league in hockey. Someone I think we're all familiar with, Gretzky? Everyone heard of Gretzky? Yeah? Cool. Yeah, a lot of people have only ever heard of his older brother, Wayne, but I'm glad everyone here has heard of Brent, Wayne's younger brother. And the Sedin brothers, they scored over 2,000 points in their career. And, but as dominant as they were, Wayne also holds the record with Brent for the most points scored by two brothers in the NHL at 2,861. And while Brent scored 4 of those, Wayne also helped out, scoring 2,857 of those points. And so, like Wayne, I think we're all the heroes in our own story. So for the rest of my talk, I'd like you to think of me as Wayne Gretzky. So I'm going to be talking about pictures today, and I did go down a bit of a rabbit hole on Wikipedia when you start looking at things and you click and you end up finally at philosophy. But a couple fun pictures I thought I would share is, like, this first one is from the Bonobos Caves in South Africa, and that's one of the earliest known pictures ever created and discovered. I guess discovered, maybe there's pictures before that. The second one is the first commercially available camera, and the third one is the first digital camera. It took 16 batteries. Do I have to explain what a camera is? Am I dating myself? And also, I do want to address the elephant in the room. This is, yes, in fact, another talk on crypto Steganography. Yeah. Okay. So if I can be serious, this is actually a talk where it's more strange, like the story is stranger than fiction, and there's a little bit of tech sprinkled in. And I was thinking, like, given the state of the world right now with, I don't know, just how horrible things are, what kind of talk would I like to hear? And so this is the kind of talk that is. So if you're interested in hearing an entertaining story, you're in the right place. But if that doesn't sound like something you're interested in, I'll take no offense if you want to get up and leave. Cool. You have no one to blame but yourself. So hey, I'm Sean. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm going to be chatting today about crypto Steganography, like nominally anyway. This is less code heavy than a lot of probably RailsConf talks. I'm mostly here because I have an interesting story I wanted to share. And also, in the time of my talk, I've built in time for you all to burst out in uncontrollable applause, so feel free at any time. Cool. To introduce myself, here's 4 fun facts about me. 1, I'm originally from Canada. 2, like all Canadians, I like to lovingly troll people. And 3, about 1 in 4 people enjoy my sense of humor, like that's humor with a U. And 4, if you've heard of me, it's probably because of Ruby for Good. It's a nonprofit I created that builds and maintains software for other nonprofits, food banks, animal shelters, places like that. Basically places that need folks of our skill set but would never be able to afford us. And so if this is something you're interested in doing, come get in touch. And as someone who recently put on a conference last autumn and is putting on another one in July, definitely not at this magnitude, I can't even begin to imagine the amount of stress and pressure that our organizers of this conference are under. So if you see an organizer, or even if you don't see one, go find one and hug them. Or I guess probably not hug them because COVID, but fist bump or just like thank them. And Max, who couldn't be here, Max is awesome. And if everyone tweets at Max and says something great to him, I will give you a Ruby for Good sticker, and if you say something really nice, I have some limited edition Ruby for Good socks that have red pandas on them for you. And I do want to acknowledge the COVID right now, because this is a bonkers time. So I hope everyone is taking care of themselves and practicing a lot of self-care. And something that's weird is a lot of people have been talking to me about COVID, and they say that they feel that the reason COVID has kind of gotten out of control is because of politics and like, I don't know, blue and red, and I didn't quite understand it. But I don't buy that, like, and I know I shouldn't talk about politics, but like, what was it, 5 years ago, 6 at the time? Like, you know, there was that new world leader elected, and, you know, that guy who I felt represented me on the world stage, and someone I was proud of, and, you know, who felt about non-white men the same way that I do. And yeah, I was just proud to have this guy as my leader. And I'm really happy he won re-election this past fall. And I hope that Canada continues to lead the way in terms of vaccination rates. So jokes aside, the pandemic has kind of messed with my sense of time. I think the world's sense of time too. Like last summer, if you all watched the Olympics, they were the 2020 Olympics, but they were happening in 2021. I don't know, but they were a lot of fun to watch. Like it was nice, you know, despite the empty stadiums, it was nice to see the world come together and, you know, just the feeling. And it was really nice to see a fellow Canadian trolling one of their teachers. And I think I mentioned that Canadians like to troll. And Penny's awesome, and you should definitely follow her on social media. She is hilarious. And it's really amazing to watch an athlete like Penny or Michael Phelps or Simone, like one of these once-in-a-generation athletes. And you know, as much as I like you know, swimming, my favorite sport by far is curling. And if you've never had the opportunity to watch it played, like curling, it's an amazing sport. It, you know, takes strategy, teamwork, like skill, and you have to enjoy being out on the ice and in the cold. And I love all those things, but that's not why I like curling. Like the real reason I like curling is that when I watch curling, I legitimately believe I could be in the Olympics and I could compete. Like, see, like look at him. Like this guy's a freak. I'm never gonna be anything like him. Like I might eat 11,000 calories in a day, but I'm not gonna be that. But like this guy, he's been to the Olympics multiple times, won multiple medals. Like he inspires me. I could be him. Well, that's Kevin Martin. He's a Canadian curler. And another reason I like curling is because my dogs like to sit on the couch and watch curling with me. And for reference, these are my dogs, Taffy and Rhodey. When I rescued them, I was only intending on getting one dog, but they insist they go together because they were a bonded pair. And I thought that was a scam that, you know, shelters do just to get you to get 2 dogs. But then once, you know, I got to know them, they're super bonded. And obviously now I'm super smitten. I couldn't imagine my life without either of them. And see, they are bonded. And you know, these are the kinds of pictures I show people when they ask me about my dogs. So here's my little dog. He likes to play hide and seek, but as you can tell, he's really bad at it because he has separation anxiety. And my other dog, she just likes to sit beside me and yawn when I yawn. But so like my dogs are kind of like little weirdos. But the thing is, it's not just dogs that are weirdos, it's people that can be weirdos too. And like a little while ago, I opened up my email, I had an email from this weird friend, you know, a weirdo, if you will. And there was no subject line, there was no body, there was just this picture attached. And this is Buffy the Vampire Slayer from the TV series. If you're not familiar, it was a series in the late 90s, early 2000s, great show. But again, the guy is kind of strange, so I didn't think anything of it, so I just deleted this picture and moved on. A couple days later, this picture showed up in my inbox. And this is from a TV show called Babylon 5. Probably the best science fiction TV show ever made. And I'll accept The Expanse if anyone says it's The Expanse, but I think Babylon 5 is better. Anyway, did everyone hear J. Michael Straczynski is remaking Babylon 5? Yeah? One other fellow fan here. And then a couple days after that picture, this one came in the mail, and it was, again, you know, like no body, nothing. And this is from a TV show called Firefly, and again, nothing. And then he started repeating these pictures, like every couple days, sometimes all 3 in a day, sometimes a day or 2 would go between them. And so then finally I emailed him and I texted him and nothing. And then I did that thing that we all hate to do. Yeah, I called him on the phone. And so he pretended he had no idea what I was talking about. And someone who trolls, I really appreciated that. And so I called a mutual friend up and asked, hey, what's up with Mike? And since I'm being recorded, I should use a different name. So I called a mutual friend up and I said, hey, what's up with Brad? And so he did some digging and he came back with like this cryptic comment with everything you need to know is in the pictures. And like I'm a big fan of these shows. And if any of you like these shows, come find me after, because we could probably be friends. And so like my first idea is it had something to do with like the shows themselves. And maybe I'm looking on IMDb, looking at actors and producers and and like just looking into anything. And then I thought, okay, I'm not finding anything. And so I went back and like, oh, maybe it's from Babylon 5. Maybe it's the episode where Veer first threatens Mr. Morden. So I go and watch that one, and like, oh, or maybe when Angel, like when he first lost his soul, and then because that's when. Okay, I guess I'm showing what a nerd I am. But I couldn't figure out anything. And at the end of the day, I had like lots of notes and a lot of theories, but nothing. And so I went, and actually the mutual friend, he was very invested at this point too. And so we went back to Brad, and Brad at this point became a little bit more willing to talk. I don't know if it's because like he thought we were trying, or just because I think he'd done something clever and he wanted to share it with us. But I guess before I go any further, I should probably explain how I know Brad. So back in 2003, I got a call out of the blue from that mutual friend, and he said, like, hey, Sean, you're from Canada. You know how to curl. We need you to fill in for someone on our curling team tonight. And my first thought was to get mad and say something like, come on, don't stereotype me. And assume just because I'm Canadian, I know how to curl, and I like maple syrup, and I'm handsome and charming and funny. But I guess there are stereotypes for a reason. But I told him I hadn't curled in 6 years. But I'd be happy to come and help the team anyway. And I don't like to use the word hero, because I think that word is overused. But long story short, I won. Or we won. And but more importantly, I was really able to like kind of help everyone like do some coaching and just help the team. And they liked me so much, they asked me to become a permanent member on the team because the person who I'd replaced just really wasn't interested anymore. He'd been skipping all the games and he was looking for a way out. And that person I replaced actually was Brad. And so everyone was happy and it was a great situation for a while. And but something that might surprise everyone is if you've ever played competitive sports, and whether or not you think curling is a sport, it's a lot more fun to play when your team is winning or at least competitive than when you're getting absolutely destroyed week after week after week. And so like now that we were on a team that was doing well and we're all having fun, it often became like this topic of a conversation. We were out together, with our partners and friends. We'd always just want to talk about curling. And Brad, I think he saw that he was missing out at this point. He wanted to rejoin the team, but he couldn't because, we're full. And the other thing I did during this time is I inspired, I think that's a politically correct way of saying bullied, the other people on the team to start watching curling in the Olympics every year. And we'd all watch, we'd get together, we'd watch curling. Super fun sport to watch. It's not soccer. And I know looking at me, you probably think that I'm, since I like to troll, I'm probably a very humble and gracious winner when I'm on top. But I'd like to think that's true now, but younger Sean quite wasn't that way. And so, in these first 3 Olympics we watched together, this is what happened in the first one. And then the second one, Canada wins. And then in turn, or Sochi, Canada wins again. And so like coming into the 2018 Olympics, you can probably imagine my level of, my attitude or smugness maybe on what was gonna happen. But this is actually coincidentally when those emails and those images started showing up in my inbox. So anyways, let's get back to these pictures. And so like Brad let me know that it wasn't the exact pictures that mattered, it was what was inside the pictures. And so at this point I knew he had embedded something into them. And so the first thing I thought, it was one of those like magic eye pictures. And if everyone's familiar with magic eye, that's where like you stare at them, and like if you just let your eyes kind of wander off, you can see an image in the background. And so I hooked my computer up to my big TV, and I just stared at my TV for way, 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 way too long. They weren't magic eye pictures. And and after I was able to determine they weren't magic eye pictures, I did what I should have done in the first place, is I consulted the arbiter of all knowledge, Google, and asked what about embedding images in information images. And Google came back with crypto-steganography, which turned out to be a massive waste of time. So crypto-steganography goes back to the roots of crypto, which is Greek for melting the ice caps and ruining the environment, and steganography, which is a kind of dinosaur. Steganography actually is the practice of hiding something, hiding information in plain sight. You just have to know it's there. And like this concept goes back, like we have recorded usages of it going back like 2,500 years. And like these are wax tablets, like they're a precursor to like a chalkboard. Like they used them in like ancient Greece and ancient Rome. And so you would write on the wax, and then you smooth the wax over, write on it again. And so when Persia was planning on invading Greece, what the Greeks living in Persia did is they would burn messages into the wax board, cover it with wax, send the wax boards back to Greece, and then they would melt the wax off, see the messages. The other thing they did is they would take slaves, they would shave their heads, they would tattoo messages into the heads, and then let the hair grow back, and then send the slaves back to Greece with troop counts and stuff tattooed into the head. And I tried to find some images of this, and I went down a real rabbit hole, and all I really found is this guy who really likes static website generators and hasn't heard of Bridgetown, I guess. And again, like as steganography and the times progressed, so did steganography. Like in about 1400, we have recorded uses of like invisible ink, and we probably all did this as kids, where we take like lemon juice on a piece of paper, and then your friend holds it up by light, heats it up, and you can read the secret message. And if any of you ever come to DC, we have the Spy Museum in DC, and it's fascinating. There's so many cool applications of this, like where they have fabric, where like there's a carpet, and then like just each little bump in the carpet is Morse code. And so like they have images there, or like they have information embedded there, like so many cool things. And if you come to DC, let me know. I'd love to take you out for a tea or coffee or beer or whatever your choice of beverages. And two, like maybe they would hide information under stamps. You just have to know to remove the stamps. And two, like even then coming into into more modern times, like microdots, if you've heard that term, which is basically information written really, really small, but then it just looks like a full stop on a piece of paper. And again, like all these examples of steganography, they have a glaring weakness that I hope everyone has figured out. It's security by obscurity. Like if you know it's there, like because there's a little dog there, so once you know the dog's there, you can't unsee it. So, if that slave goes prematurely bald, you can see the message tattooed in his head, or you leave those wax boards up against a stove, the wax is going to melt off, and these messages are going to be discovered. And this is where the cryptography comes in. And like cryptography is just encoding the messages, and we have results. We have recorded uses of cryptography going back as far as like Julius Caesar, with one of the earliest known ciphers, like used to use a cipher to encode all his messages. And the earliest known cipher, one of the earliest known ciphers, is the Caesar cipher. And again, though, like now we have computers and digital, documents and images, and like there is information everywhere, and like there are so many ways that you can embed things in. And this is actually now like a very, very, very common attack vector for like viruses, and like several of the biggest ransomware attacks recently have been through steganography attacks, like having this information embedded, and then yeah. And so, but again, like the people on the other side of this, like trying to discover this, they are really smart people too. So like, so don't panic. I'm not trying to scare anyone. But if you do want to send, if you do want to embed some information, some researchers at Cambridge say the best way to embed information is to embed it into a random looking stream. And so if anyone has any ideas, like my idea is to have the Windows screensaver going behind me with embedded information in it, because that's random, isn't it? I know there's no true randomness in computers, but. So anyways, let's get back to these images and how steganography works with images. So when you're embedding like some information, some text in an image, you want to alter the least significant bit of each of the pixels. And I know I probably just threw some words out there like pixels and least significant bits, so let me break that down. So pixels, like if you look at an image, what an image is at its core, is just a series of many tiny single points of color, pixels. And so like if we look at this lady's eye, we zoom in far enough, we just see these are all individual colors. They're not like blends or anything. And you can see the colors of pixels are made up of three colors: red, green, and blue. And if you open up a color picker on your computer, or if you've ever done like CSS, you'll see like RGB, and like something like this. Like here's, maybe that's too small, but like we see I picked a random green, and like that's a RGB of like 50, 168, 82, and that's the CSS values from 0 to 255. And you're probably wondering why 0 to 255. And the reason why is binary. And binary is how computers ultimately store information. That's all those like zeros and ones. If you ever saw a matrix, something like this, all the little zeros and ones. Actually, I think it was matrix with all those little symbols. But so like at computers at their core, they represent everything as these little bits, these little zeros and ones that can get turned off and on. And eight of those bits, we group them into groups of 8 for a byte. And 1,000 bytes is a kilobyte. 64 kilobytes is enough for anyone. And then you have megabytes, gigabytes, terabytes, and on until you're at Google scale. And so, and then too, like if you buy a laptop that has 32 gigabytes of RAM and a 500 gigabyte hard drive, you know at your core how many of those little zeros and ones you can turn off and on. And so, and like this is a byte. This is a group of 8. And how it works is you start on the right, and each bit is worth double the number preceding. So maybe I can show that better here. And so like a random byte here, so like the first one is worth 1, 2, 4, 8, 16. And so each of the ones that are turned on, we would add up to get the value of this byte. So this byte here is worth 155. And here's just some example of counting in binary with the different ones and zeros turned on. So like a 1 just has the 1 turned on, a 10 has the 8 and the 2 turned on, and so on. If you have all the values turned on, that's 255. Cool. Cool, and so hopefully now this RGB color of 50, 168, 82 makes sense now. It's 3 bytes that have different bits in those bytes turned on. And that's also how we can get that number of 16 million different color combinations, because if there's 0 to 255 in each, we multiply 256 times 3, that's that 16 million number. And so, and if you were paying attention, you probably heard that I said you alter the least significant bits. And the least significant bits are just the bits in a byte that alter the value of the least. And so, like they are the ones on the right. So like if we alter the very last bit, and like if it's a 255, they're all turned on. If we turn that one off, the value now is just 254. Like barely any change. But if we alter the most significant bit, that subtracts 128 off it, so it goes from 255 to 127. And again, like a human eye, generally, like in one of those color scales, you're not going to be able to differentiate between a 1-bit color change. And so like this is a pure blue image. There is all the blue turned on, all the red and green turned off, and you can go play with this on one of these color picker sites. And here's the same blue with just a single bit turned off, a red turned on, and a blue turned off, so there's 2 bits changed, 3. And again, like here's all those together, and like a human eye should not be able to differentiate these. And even like here's one with 6 bits changed, like. And again, like these should all look identical to the regular eye, and especially too when they're on pixel scale, you're not going to be able to differentiate. And so you might say, oh, that's just because it's blue and it's a pure, but a primary color. But even like a combination color like yellow, which is red and green, like these is a couple bits changed here, and you shouldn't be able to tell the difference. So these least significant bits, this is how we embed information in a picture. We basically say, like, to our program that we only care about, or we don't care what the last bit in every single color is. We're going to take those bits, and we're going to, when we pull out the last bit in every color, we want to put those into a thing, group them into bytes, and then whatever those bytes are, that's going to decode into our message. And we're going to use something like ASCII to do that. And ASCII is just a character representation, like numbers into characters and numbers and letters. Cool. So let's get back to those pictures, and hopefully you're all starting to guess where the story's going at this point. And you remember I had a bunch of pictures that I know contain some information. And these were the pictures. And so recapping, so I have a friend I replaced on a curling team. Then I got a group of friends excited about curling, and we'd all watch the Olympics together. You know, Canada invariably every year would win the Olympics. And I was probably a less than gracious winner. I'm evolved enough to say that. And maybe even a bit of a troll leading up to the games. But shortly before the 2018 Olympics, I started getting those pictures every day in my email. And then after Olympics, I was getting them multiple times every day. And I'm sure everyone here knows what happened in the 2018 Olympics, curling? Yes, USA won gold. And I guess that's kind of cool, I guess. You know, because like I tried to convince my friends in 2018 that, you know, they introduced the new mixed doubles in 2018, so we should really stop caring about men's curling. We should really now start caring about mixed doubles, because, you know, to be more inclusive. And it had nothing to do with the fact that Canada won gold. But again, enough with the digressions. You all want to know what was in those messages. That's the reason I guess you probably haven't left yet, despite the technical difficulties. But before I get into that, I do want to tell you about the time I met the Canadian band, the Bare Naked Ladies. No, okay, no. Ask me about it after. Okay, so I had the skills, and I was decoding these messages. But it turned out, though, that the messages in the pictures leading up to the Olympics were different than the messages after Olympics. And the messages leading up to the Olympics, in the three pictures, the messages were basically, in the first one, disparaging comments about Canada. And again, I'm being politically correct here, not what was actually in the message. But the second one were disparaging comments on my curling ability. And the third one was how this was America's year to win gold in curling. And the messages after the Olympics was just this message over and over and over. And if you remember, that's the score by which America won gold. And so they say in a story it's good for the protagonist to show growth and character development, and you know, have some takeaways. And so I want to share what I've learned from it all and what you can apply to your lives. And I've reflected, done soul searching. You know, even thought too, like, what would Wayne Gretzky do? But after thinking long and hard, this is what I've come up with. It's that the Canadian curling team was sabotaged in the 2018 Olympics. The World Curling Illuminati all conspired to make Canada lose and the US win. And I believe that my speaking out here today is going to lead to me being silenced. So I encourage you all to spread the message. I hope you enjoyed the story despite the technical difficulties. Thank you for your time.